Former NYPD Lieutenant Commander and Homicide Detective Vern Geberth, former prosecutors, current defense attorneys Jeffrey Gold and Joey Jackson join us. And you're going to be surprised to see two additional attorneys at this table, the defense team in the Drew Peterson case. I'm going to start with you guys here. Now, Vern, you wrote the book, Practical Homicide Investigation, and I got to get this out of the way. You're in the 4th edition, your book. It's a Bible for homicide detectives.
They recognize best
Does this investigation stink?
Oh, absolutely. I wish that I was the first responder.
Why?
Well, because from the get-go, they went in there with a preconceived notion that it was an accidental death. And I personally believe, based on my conversations with folks in the Illinois State Police, as well as others, that the lead investigator was not qualified to conduct an investigation.
You think? He never did a homicide investigation.
Well, it goes beyond that. You know, some wizard in the Illinois State Police decided to take road cops and promotion, like a social promotion, and put them into places they didn't belong. You have to be qualified to conduct a homicide investigation. This guy was not. And as far as the crime scene person, who is he to make a determination as to the cause of death or manner of death?
And to call it an accident and tell him, do not collect any evidence.
Well, I would say this. I would say any investigator with the least modicum of common sense would have seen that as a suspicious death.
Yeah, Jeff, you've been in the courtroom.
Common sense, nothing. It was a cop. They were investigating a cop. It was as if they went to stop somebody for speeding and he flashed a badge and they let him go, but it was a homicide. And they treated it like a speeding, professional courtesy, and they let the thing go.
There's no professional courtesy for homicide. If I had a cop...
You ain't kidding about that.
I wish I was the first responder.
And this Illinois investigator may do a lot of bodies dropped off on 55 coming out of Chicago, but he didn't do a lot of these. This was ridiculous.
It's a well-stated point, Jeff, but ultimately what has to happen is jurors need evidence, and if they can't produce the evidence because it's not there because police didn't do their job, then what?
Yeah.
You need physical evidence there.
But isn't that the point?
It is.
They didn't do their job and they were giving the homicide away.
Yes, but now that the prosecution's trying to backtrack to show how inept
but they
were.
exhumed the body, so doesn't that tell us what happened? There was still tissue on her body, deep bruising down to the bone.
Judge, I think if you look at Bloom and his testimony, I think it's powerful and effective, but remember, he had to make certain admissions, like what? Like the person who's deceased, who ultimately did it, is a very respected pathologist who happened to have opinions that differed from his own.
But Joey, I'm going to tell you something you didn't know because you weren't in the courtroom. That pathologist never saw the picture that I saw in the courtroom.
That's tough.
He's doing the autopsy without seeing her feet in a 90-degree angle up against the wall. She's squeezed in. She's like a sardine, worse than a sardine. I had sardines the other day. They're lined up straight. All right? What do you want to say, you defense attorneys?
Oh, my God. Well, you know, when it comes to the position of the toes, that doesn't mean anything because when the body's settled, and that's what our pathologists say, as the body settles and rigor sets in, that's why the toes got in that way. And that tub is not that small. Evidence is from Kathy's boyfriend.
That's hogwash. Rigor sets in, her arms and legs go straight.
No, but the muscles expand.
The muscles expand. That's why they go straight. And then when the rigor goes out of her body,
then the body stayed in the same place.
Why is her hair dry? All right, if she was...
Her hair isn't dry. Her hair was damp.
They said her hair was dry and there was blood in her hair.
No, it was damp. It was damp. Her hair was damp.
That's not what I heard.
Which means one thing, Judge.
One second. Dr. Bloom was a very good witness for the state. You guys will agree. I don't think the defense did a great job on that. That was a good state's day, but they haven't had many days. It's almost impossible for you guys to lose. This case is, there's nothing to connect Drew Peterson to the homicide. So as much as there's nothing to connect him there.
But Jeff, that's not outcome determinative for the following reason.
How many witnesses have you excluded?
Over 10.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're not having a search for truth, because there are no witnesses being allowed to testify.
No, because ultimately...
Okay, hang on, guys.
No fight.
Here's the thing. It's not a search for the truth, because if it were, you guys would put those people on the stand and beat them up.
But they're hearsay witnesses.
It's not a crapshoot.
And you know what? There's something called forfeiture by wrongdoing, which is why hearsay is admissible. Let me tell this to my viewers.
Okay, go
The reason hearsay is admissible is because if you commit a crime that prevents someone from testifying, you cannot benefit by having done something wrong. For example, if you stop Kathleen Savio from testifying at the divorce settlement, you can't say now everything she said doesn't come in, because if you're wrongdoing, it comes in. And if you stop Stacey Peterson from testifying that Drew said X, Y, and Z by murdering her, then that comes in too.
Well stated, Judge, and that's why it comes down to interpretation. If the jury, even though, Jeff, the physical evidence is lacking, if the jury believes some of the circumstantial evidence, and it mounts and it mounts and it mounts, it can be compelling enough for a conviction. What I want to wait and see is what the defense has lined up in terms of the experts, because it'll come down to a battle of them.
We have 3 experts who are going to testify that this, in their eminent opinion, was an accident. It always was, all 3
But none of them did an autopsy.
Well, we couldn't re-exhume the body. He wasn't charged till 2 years later. But Dr. Bloom said that he reviewed their work, and their work was good, and it's just a matter of opinion, and great minds can disagree, and that's what it's going to come down to.
Guys, what do you think of the fact that the jury's dressing like the low pie?
Yeah, I don't know what to make. I really don't know what to make of that. I think that this case is home free for Drew Peterson, except for one thing, that there could be a hung jury, and he'll still sit in jail unless one thing happens, and that's unless Drew Peterson decides to not listen to you and 1,000 other lawyers and get up and testify. If he doesn't, he'll win his case, but he'll be a pariah, or he'll sit in jail on a hung jury until the next one.
Jeff,
the only way that he will walk a truly free man is if he actually looks that jury in the eye, those that are wearing the same colors, and testifies.
He's trying to bait him.
But
He is baiting.
I thought
I'm telling you something.
Peterson, get on the stand and admit what you did.
OJ is locked up now. He will never truly be a free man unless he looks that jury in the eye.
But
that's karma.
Yeah, exactly.
That is
he got away with it,
Go
Jeff.
ahead, Vern.
Let's talk about let's get back to behavior, all right? We wouldn't be having this discussion right now if Drew Peterson didn't put himself in that position by the way he behaved. Psychopathic personality, malignant narcissism, taking pictures of the news media, smiling, making jokes when his wife is missing, carrying on the way he did, caused the authorities to go back and look at Kathleen Savio. And when they dug her up and they exhumed the body and they found it was a homicide, now they're back to, what do we do?
Well, that on top of the addition of his next wife being missing. I mean, you know, when the 4th wife goes missing,
he was
obviously.
so sure that Stacey would never be found, that he put that act on. Stacey will never be found.
No, she won't.
He had the cops baffled. You know, this guy is a bully. He's the kind of person in police departments, and I've seen him. I've seen a lot of people in police departments that come into a police department and they use their position in a manner that is obviously not professional, but more importantly, to their advantage. And he used his position to his advantage. And your client is his worst enemy, I'll tell you right now, because anybody who watched him on national television said, Drew Peterson did it.
I don't disagree with that, and I'm glad you're not on the jury.
You ought to be glad I didn't come to the scene.
Here's the bottom line. If the truth is that this was a homicide and not an accident, are you going to argue in closing statement that if it is a homicide, that someone other than Drew did it?
Well, we're never going to give up that this was an accident. This clearly was an accident. The death certificate still reads accident as a couple months ago.
Are you going to point to someone else as possibly doing something to Kathleen in your closing statement?
You'd have to ask Joe Lopez. He's doing the closing.
All right, we'll have him on.
We'll have him and his wife, and they'll dress alike.
Okay, yeah.
And we can bring Ralph Metchik on, because I think Ralph did a great job in that cross-examination.
Okay, that's a defense attorney who cross-examined Bloom. Whoa, you were in the courtroom.
I'll tell you, Ralph is a sweet guy, and I like him, but it brought gasps to the jury. In fact, Joel had at some point asked the judge later, make sure nobody gasps. But the jury gasped when he asked a question to this eminently qualified county medical examiner who'd done a very respectable job in that courtroom and seemed to answer every question. And at a certain point he said, so that's your lame excuse for, and the jury gasped because of the disrespect shown for him.
Guys?
But Ralph's a good guy.
But Ralph was smart enough to be able to get in on their case. And the fact that we had 3 experts, he got that in on their case.
Let me ask you this.
That was genius.
Why isn't Ralph here and all you guys are on the media all the time? Ralph says it's not ethical to do.
Well, I don't know about that.
Are on TV every day, twice a day.
Hold on. Hey, everybody relax.
Okay,
she makes
Jeff, that is not true. You know what the rules are. You and I have talked about that. And you know
I need a gavel.
Order in the court.
All right, gentlemen, don't you agree that this jury is being prevented from hearing all of the truth?
They're being prevented from hearing inadmissible evidence. And inadmissible evidence is inadmissible because it's not reliable. They are hearing what's been filtered through the system to present to a jury, which is only reliable evidence. That's what the rules of evidence, you know this, that's what the rules of evidence are all for, to filter out the unreliable and make sure that the jury only convicts or acquits based upon reliable evidence.
All right.
Didn't
How do you
sustain
explain
objections?
Of course I did.
So
but I'm not saying how I ruled on them or what I did. How do you guys explain the bilateral contusions in the under the clavicle?
They were under. Those are. There was not in the
go
skin.
right to the bone.
Those are the only thing that was on the bone was the hip injury. But you're talking about the clavicle. Those were artifacts from the autopsy because they were not on the skin. They were underneath.
Yeah, because she died right after that happened. You know what I think it is? I think he forced her head in the toilet, and it was the rim of the toilet under the collarbone that gave that bruising. He forced her down so hard. It's the ultimate degradation.
Heck of a theory.
But anyway, gentlemen, we'll see you all in Chicago next week. Thank you, Jeff,
I'll tell you not to win.
Joel, and tell your client that, right? And Steve Greenberg. Thanks, guys, for a lively discussion.